Right now, we are living through one of the biggest corporate spending sprees in history, and it's all focused on one single technology: artificial intelligence. It's a full-blown arms race with trillions of dollars on the table. But here's the crazy part. While the investment is just astronomical, the actual returns, well, for most people, they're basically invisible. And this has split the world in two. You've got one camp saying this is a new industrial revolution, and the other camp screaming that we're in a bubble that's going to make the dot-com crash look like a minor hiccup.
Big tech in the US is on track to spend about $300 billion on AI stuff. To put that in perspective, that's like funding the entire Apollo program, the one that put a man on the moon, every single year. So all that money is flying out the door. And yet, here's the number that has all the skeptics completely freaking out. A recent study from MIT found that a whopping 95% of generative AI pilot projects are currently producing zero return on investment. Zero. That is a massive, massive disconnect between the spending and the results.
So this brings us right to the heart of the matter, the big question. Is all this unprecedented spending the foundation for a new age of technology, a totally necessary world-changing build-out, or is it just a speculative frenzy, a house of cards built on hype that's doomed to collapse? Let's dig in and look at both sides of this argument.
All right, first up, let's hear from the optimists. This is the bull case. And for them, what we're seeing is not a bubble. Not at all. They say this is just the messy, chaotic, but absolutely essential birth of a powerful new economic engine.
The core of their argument is that AI isn't just another product. It's what's called a general-purpose technology. Think about it like electricity or the internet. It's not a thing, it's the thing that changes everything. And the projections are huge. Goldman Sachs thinks it could boost global productivity by over 1% a year for a whole decade. And look at how fast people are jumping on board. It's happening even faster than the PC or internet rollouts ever did. The ambition here is just off the charts. We're talking about a $3 to $4 trillion build-out by 2030.
Of course, this immediately brings up the ghost of the dot-com bust. But the optimists say, hold on, this time is different, and here's why. The dot-com bubble was fueled by risky debt and venture capital money being thrown at companies that had no revenue, no profits, nothing. Today's AI boom? It's being bankrolled by the massive cash flow from some of the most profitable companies on the planet, like Microsoft and Google. They argue this is a fundamentally healthier, more stable foundation.
And this whole idea is summed up perfectly by NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang, whose company is right at the center of this storm. He just dismisses any talk of a bubble. He frames it as an AI race. And for him, and a lot of folks in Silicon Valley, this spending isn't a gamble. It's a critical investment you have to make to build the factories of the future. Okay, so that's the sunny side of the street. But for every bull, there's a bear. So let's flip the coin and look at the other side, the growing pile of evidence that suggests we're in a classic and maybe very dangerous bubble. And we're not just talking about a few pessimistic bloggers here. The really big, serious institutions are starting to get worried. The Bank of England, the Bank of England, just put out this official warning. They said that valuations look stretched and that markets are particularly exposed. When a central bank starts using language like that, it's probably time to pay attention.
And when you look at the economic dashboard, you can see why they're concerned. The red lights are flashing. The Buffett indicator, which compares the stock market's value to the country's GDP, is at a historic extreme. The market is also super concentrated, with just 7 companies, the Magnificent Seven, making up more than a third of the S&P 500. Then there's a potential $800 billion gap between spending and revenue. And get this, a lot of recent US economic growth is actually coming from this AI spending. If you take that away, some say we'd already be in a recession. Now, this next bit is crucial for understanding the bear case. It's a concept called circular financing. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Imagine big tech company A invests $1 billion in a hot AI startup. Then, that startup immediately turns around and uses that $1 billion to buy cloud services from company A. You see what happens? The money just goes around in a circle. It makes both companies' revenues look amazing on paper, but is any real value actually being created? Or are they just inflating each other's valuations?
And if you want to see just how frothy things are, take a look at this chart. It's the forward price to earnings ratio, a key way to measure if stocks are cheap or expensive. The long-term average is about 16. At the absolute tippy-top peak of the dot-com bubble, it hit 26. And where are we today? We're at 25. That is perilously close to the peak of a bubble that we all know ended very, very badly. So we have two completely opposite stories. It's either a revolution or it's a bubble. But what if the answer isn't so black and white? What if, somehow, it's both? This brings us to a much more nuanced and maybe more realistic way of looking at things.
Jeff Bezos actually has a really interesting take on this. He calls it an industrial bubble. The idea is that this has all happened before. Think about the railway boom in the 1800s or the fiber optic boom in the 90s. Both were massive, crazy financial bubbles. Tons of investors got wiped out. But when the dust settled, something incredibly valuable was left behind. We got a national rail network. We got a world wired with the internet. The financial bubble popped, but it left behind real, lasting infrastructure. And this is really the heart of the argument. There's a real transformative technological core. The AI itself is the real deal. But it's all wrapped up in a speculative financial shell that has every classic symptom of a bubble: crazy hype, weird financing, and sky-high valuations. The key idea here is that both of these things can be true at the exact same time. But, and this is a huge but that a lot of people are missing, there's one critical difference this time: the durability of the assets. You see, when the railway and fiber optic bubbles burst, they left behind stuff: steel tracks, buried cables, that were useful for decades. The core assets of the AI boom, they're GPUs and data centers. And these things are not built to last. They have an economic life of maybe 3 to 5 years before they're obsolete. This means that if this bubble bursts, there might not be a cushion of valuable stuff left over. The destruction of capital could be much, much more complete.
So, where does that leave us? Well, it frames the whole situation as a high-stakes race against time. The stability of this entire system now really boils down to a single, crucial question.
Can businesses actually use this technology to make money or save money fast enough and at a big enough scale to justify the hundreds of billions being spent? That is the whole ballgame. You know, that first wave of investment was all about FOMO, fear of missing out. That phase is now ending. The people writing the checks are starting to get louder, and they're asking, okay, so where's our return on investment?
And the clock is ticking. Most experts think we've got about 12 to 24 months before we hit a moment of truth. By mid-2027, this current wave of corporate AI pilot projects will be over, and companies will have to make a hard decision. Do we go all in, or do we pull the plug? If adoption stalls, the big cloud companies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, the ones spending all this money, they will slam on the brakes. And that's when this fragile financial structure could start to unravel, and fast.
So, as this whole story unfolds, what should you be watching? Here's a quick checklist. First, corporate earnings reports. Ignore the hypey language and look for real AI revenue dollars. Second, enterprise ROI. Are you seeing real-world proof that businesses are getting huge productivity gains? Third, watch the capital expenditure, the CAPEX, from the tech giants. That's the money they're spending on new gear. If they start pulling back on those spending plans, that is a major red flag. And finally, keep an eye on interest rates, because that will determine if the broader market has a safety net or not.
Ultimately, the question isn't just boom or bubble. It's about what gets left behind when the music stops. The decisions made over these next 2 years are going to determine whether this historic wave of investment builds the foundation for a whole new era of productivity, or if it just leaves us with a bunch of warehouses full of rapidly depreciating, worthless silicon. The race is on.